Hi, I'm Andy, and today I'm going to be answering some of your questions about meditation and mindfulness, specifically how it relates to everything that's going on in the world right now. Let's get started. So this question is from Ivan, and Ivan says, I'd like to ask some tips on overcoming my anxiety during this pandemic. I feel that the system is falling apart. So Ivan, I think it is in some ways that we are seeing it tested in a way that it hasn't been tested in many countries before. I think we're seeing a strain and a burden that hasn't been experienced before. And I hope that we learn a lot from this. I think in terms of the anxiety itself, I will always come back to this same thing with meditation, with mindfulness, that we can't control everything around us, and that's the system breaking down. But what we can do, we can change our relationship to it, and we can change our experience of it. So some of you might feel anxious all the time anyway, or very often on a very frequent basis. And for some people, the feeling of anxiety might be quite new and specific to what's going on right now. Either way, the dynamic of anxiety is the same. Typically, we experience some thoughts in our mind. They make us feel unsettled in some way. So we experience that as a physical sensation that relates to anxiety. And that's different from person to person. But just as an example, it might be butterflies in the stomach, or chest tightening, or something like that. Sweaty palms, could be anything. The mind then recognizes that as a signal of anxiety. So it then ramps up that thinking cycle of, oh no, and now I feel anxious, what do I do? And we start feeling anxious about feeling anxious. So at some point, the only way of breaking that cycle is to step out of the thinking mind, because that's what's fanning the flames, that's what's encouraging those sensations. The easiest way of doing that is to find a focal point in the body, a way of grounding the mind in the body. So if you're sitting down, it might be your backside against the seat beneath you. If you're standing up, it might be the sensation of your feet, the soles of the feet against the floor. If you're lying down, it could be your back or your head resting on the floor, the bed, the sofa, wherever you might be. But by stepping out of the thinking mind and bringing our attention into a physical sensation, we essentially cut that loop and we start to slow things down a little bit. It takes a little bit of practice, but makes a really big difference and definitely worth giving a try right now. So this next question is from Jessica. Jessica writes, I have a friend who's tested positive for COVID and is in the hospital. I know she downloaded Headspace to try, but breathing is difficult. I think focusing on the breath brings anxiety. Any thoughts on relaxing or meditating without the emphasis of breathing? Jessica, I hope that your friend recovers as quickly as is possible. So I think for some people, just generally anyway, actually, focusing on the breath is not always helpful. When we're threatened by something that compromises our health and our respiratory system, it can sometimes be unnerving to bring our attention to that system. So if you do find that, either because you are anxious that you might have it, or if you are even in the situation where you might have been tested and you do have it, then definitely I'd recommend maybe something more like a visualization. So the stress course immediately comes to mind for that. There's a really nice visualization in there that kind of helps both the body and the mind feel more relaxed. And then there are also those, if you're feeling very sort of isolated, very separate from the people that you love, the people you care about, if you look at the relationships course, I think it is, and also the kindness course, there are some great exercises in there, but where we actually imagine other people and we create a sense of connection with them. And we can use the breath or not use the breath, but more noticing how can we work with the mind where we don't necessarily have to focus on the body. So this next question is from Magali in Sydney. Hi, Magali. Magali says, I have a close friend who's been snapping at me a lot lately. I know they're stressed at the moment and there's plenty of reasons for their behavior, but it still hurts. How would you respond? So Magali, my guess is that you are not the only one in this situation right now. I think with all of us being put together in very small spaces with one another, we're all starting to experience perhaps sides of each other we don't ordinarily see in everyday life, either because we're distracted by other things, or we don't spend quite so much time together, or we're not so aware of other people's behavior. And look, all of this is not to excuse any harmful, hurtful actions or words. Like, we still are absolutely entitled, and we should say to others when we have been harmed and when we have been hurt. But in terms of how we work with that in our own mind once we've shared that experience with the other person, you know, if you think about the journey of meditation, in many ways when we sit to understand our own mind. We sit to become more familiar with the neurosis in our mind. We start to see just how many thoughts there are. We start to see how often we might be sort of overwhelmed by emotion. And in seeing that, we start to get a sense of like, wow, like this can't just be me. This is the human experience. Other people must be experiencing this as well. So we start to maybe consider, rather than reacting very quickly to others, we start to consider, okay, I get it. Yeah, I feel like that sometimes. So it's essentially an empathetic response. So by building understanding of our own mind, we're at the same time cultivating a compassionate mind towards others. And so right now, I think stress is coming out in so many different ways in different people. It's not always intentional. Again, it doesn't excuse it. But I do think more than ever, we need to kind of lean into that and to recognize that it's difficult. We might think that we know how to cope. We might think that others know how to cope. But sometimes stress, anxiety comes out in strange ways, and often ways that can hurt, that can harm. So really important that we communicate that to one another. Really important that we extend that understanding to one another. But most important of all, that we give each other the space that we're able to, and that we extend kindness both to our own mind, but also to those around us as well. So this next question is from Anthony. And Anthony says, my wife and I are both working full-time jobs while self-isolating and looking after our young kids. It's been exhausting, and all of my regular routines, including meditation, have gone out the window. So I know this period will come to an end eventually, and I'll be able to pick it back up again. But any guidance for what I can do in the meantime? I feel like I need meditation now more than ever. You will not be alone in this experience. There are a lot of people in your situation, and you're right. It's really difficult to try and maintain healthy routines, aspects of self-care, and even those things that we know that will really benefit us. Even outside of this situation right now, there are so many things in life that we know that are good for us, but that we don't do. And there are so many things in life that we know don't make us feel good, and yet we do them anyway. So I think there is an opportunity. This is a leveler where we can kind of say, okay, if I could only have one or two things in my day that are going to help me sort of feel better, what are they going to be, and what am I going to prioritize? So I have two recommendations. The first one is that you have a discussion with your partner and say, look, this is really important to me. I know you're maxed out right now. I'm maxed out right now. I know I can be a better partner. I know I can be a better father if I take 10 minutes out of my day. When I come back, I won't promise to come back a changed person, but I know that I will have a calmer mind, and I'm likely to be a kinder partner, a kinder father. And in return, I'd like to do the same thing for you so that you can have that time out during the day as well. So that's number one. Number two is how you could kind of even make this a family activity. So it's something that we've tried to do at home as well in this situation, to sit down or to lie down on the floor and to do a short meditation. If you go to the Headspace for Kids section, you'll find some 1 minute, some 3 minute exercises. They're made to feel a bit more fun. They're made to feel a bit more accessible. And I think there's a really special kind of opportunity actually to all come together as a family and take that time. I think over time that can become a really nice part of a day, long, hopefully, after this crisis passes us by. But I would say of those two things, try to negotiate so you can get some time to yourself, and then try to encourage perhaps one time in the day where you all come together. Thanks so much for watching today. If you've got any more questions for me, please feel free to send them in to askandy@headspace.com, and I'll do my best to answer them in a future episode. See you again soon.